Are you ready?
Good news, everyone!
I'm the surprise in your cereal box. I'm
great! Everybody else sucks!
I said, are you ready?
Yes, sir, random kid I just met.
It's Jake Ciley.
Hooray! People are paying attention to me.
That's right! You're always blaming me!
So, my reputation exceeds me.
It's time to check the link.
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
You know what? You just made the list!
It's all in football.
Sure, we talk about it all the time.
Really?
No, burn.
What is up, you duckaroos? It is All in Football on FTN Network with my good buddy Chris Meaney. If you missed the news, by the way, newly engaged Chris Meaney, who was up there in New York for Flex, give him some more congratulations and love on Twitter or whatever the hell we're calling it these days. I'm at All In Kid. If you want to go to FTN, code All In, get you 20% off. But also, as a reminder, because we're getting a lot of people back, but we're trying to get everybody back. We got the iTunes Nuke the Old episode podcast link. So make sure you are checking the new link. There you go. Check the new link. But please resubscribe so you make sure you get your episodes and not wondering, why haven't you talked since July? And also re-review. Give a nice little review. Hopefully 5 stars. I mean, you can give us 3 if you don't like us, but please review. It enters you into the contest for FTN Plus free for 1 year. We got 1 more week after this to get your entries in. You want to make sure you get them in too, because it takes like a day or 2 for the reviews to show up on iTunes. So make sure you get them in before the deadline, because you need like 2 days before the deadline. But anyway, point being, we appreciate it. We appreciate you guys. And over at The Athletic, I think it's still 50 cents a week or something weird like that. But customizable projections, rankings. I know. A second round of sleepers are out. Some love for Elijah Moore. You and I were talking before the show. I'm surprised I had to bring up Deuce Vaughn, who's ADP right now is undrafted. But that's not the big news, Meanie. We finished our show on Monday. A few hours later, all of a sudden, I finished my projections. And 5 minutes later, Ezekiel Elliott signs. Yay! Let's redo all the projections for that team. And then a few hours later, Dalvin Cook signs. Yay! Time to redo the projections all over again and move everybody around. We actually had a flex draft go on yesterday, and we have one again today. It was the super flex yesterday. It is the one quarterback this is today with the rejiggered scoring, whatever you want to call it. 5 points across the board for touchdowns in case you're watching on Twitter. So the touchdowns are kind of more just balanced. You know how I always say for quarterbacks. Where do we get 4 from anyway? Like just 5 across the board. But also 1 point for 5 rushing and receiving yards and 1 point for 15 passing, bringing some of the value, more scoring, but bringing some of the value back to yards instead of the randomness of, hey, my guy ran 10 yards and scored a touchdown. That equals the dude who had 10 carries or 15 carries for 70 yards. Why? So it kind of like does that. But the biggest change is if you go look at the defensive scoring. Points for forcing a 3 and out. Points for a 4th down failed conversion, which is essentially a turnover. A lot of these points for yards allowed, not just points allowed, but also the reverse. You give up too much, you could have a really... So it kind of turns them into defenses into tight ends. So like you'll have maybe not a Kelsey, but you might have like a Mark Andrews, Darren Waller's, TJ Hawkinson defense-wise. So maybe you do take them before the last round. I wonder how many of the experts, quote-unquote, actually paid attention and aren't just going to still draft the defense in the last round. But all that being said, Ezekiel Elliott, Meanie, that's what we got to talk about first. We have to give our takes. I know it's been 2 days and there's been a lot out there. I brought up the flex to say this. Ramondre Stevenson went in the 4th round, essentially the 3rd, because it's a super flex. So we got to knock him up around reverse-wise. He still went in the 3rd, which is about a round drop, maybe half, because he's been floating around the end of the 2nd round. The interesting thing I thought about it, Meanie, was not so much that Stevenson didn't fall, is that Zeke went all the way down in like the 11th. Like nobody wanted Zeke. So what's your take on the signing? Did you move Stevenson down and then is Zeke even relevant for you?
I think Zeke is kind of relevant. I took him in the 11th as well in your flex league in New York, but of course that wasn't a super flex league. And
before, yeah,
and I was kind of thin at the running back position, and I mean, we've been kind of playing this game with Zeke in New England for a couple
then let me
weeks.
rephrase the question for you. Are you happy that you got him in the 11th now?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
I figured that he would jump up a little bit. I moved him to RB 40-ish, 41, 42. It's in a tier with Jamal Williams and a bunch of like pass catching running backs like Jerick McKinnon and Samaje Perine and guys like that. And I'm pretty low on DeAndre Swift.
So 40, by the way.
Oh, wow. And I didn't really move Ramondre that much. I got him at 12. I had him as a top 10 back. I had him right at 10. But again, we've been playing this game with Breece Hall and Ramondre Stevenson. We've been talking on the show. Like maybe you want to stay clear of those two guys because it sounds like the Jets and the Pats want to bring in help at the running back position. I feel like Ramondre is going to be fine. You know, he was top 5 in catches and targets last year among running backs. He's just a really good running back. I mean, he overtook Damian Harris last year. Damian Harris averaged 9.6 carries per game last year. Is that what Zeke's going to get this year? I think Zeke is an upgrade over Harris, and I just know what's going to happen. There's going to be times where Zeke is going to get the goal line carries. He just is. Like his involvement through the air has been on the decline the past couple of seasons. He hasn't been super efficient. He's good as a pass protector, and he's good near the goal line. Like that, those are two things that he can do very, very well. So
yeah,
I'm not worried about Ramondre. I think even in the 4th there, I think it's still a pretty decent pick. And Zeke is just like a guy that, I don't know, you put him in your flex line. Like he put his flex, bye weeks, injuries. You just hope that he falls in the end zone. I kind of view his games as maybe 10 for 40 yards and a touchdown. Like maybe,
wow, 40, not 33. Like this is going to go a little lower for the touchdown.
Fewer than 4 yards per carry, probably.
I'm with you. I apparently still am the one who, why do I love Stevenson so much? I went from 8 to 10. My biggest difference is what you said is my concern is I don't think it's that he's sometimes taking the goal line carries. I think it's going to be frequent. And because if you looked at Zeke, even last year, Ezekiel Elliott was near the top of the league in efficiency of inside the 10 and somewhat inside the 20, but mainly inside the 10 goal line, goal to go. Near the bottom was Stevenson. So where I had Stevenson before this at 8 is because I said, I know he's been inefficient near the goal to go, but at the same time, I'm looking at Pierre Strong, Kevin Harris. I'm like,
right.
I fine. I like, how many times did you really going to come out for those guys? Well, I had him about 6 or 7 rushing touchdowns. I took Zeke in, added some of the rushes his way, but more importantly, some of the carries at the goal line, goal to go. Yeah. Those carries specifically, which factor that in. Yeah, Stevenson lost 2.5 rushing touchdowns. That's pretty significant. He went from almost 7 to about 4, and like 4.5. Significant enough, but it was only dropped from 8 to 10 because that top 10 tier of running backs, you start getting question marks right after them. So there was actually a pretty significant gap between those and projections, and that's why I kind of kept them at 10. I'm not saying you're stupid low on it and I was super, but I go back to like Matt Forte's seasons when he scored like 3 rushing touchdowns. Like, I think that's fine for Stevenson. He'd still be a top 10 running back, and maybe he falls to 12, and you're more right than I am. But the point being is, like, we're in agreement that we're not that concerned, and we're also in agreement that Zeke deserves something. Like, if Stevenson gets hurt, it'll be 15 for 20 yards, but Zeke's going to score. Like, I mean,
there's been lots of backs like that they're not quote unquote sexy, right? I'm sure his catches would go up if that was the point. Like he could still catch the rock. It's just they had a guy in Tony Pollard and Ramondre Stevenson too. Like that's where I feel like Stevenson will be fine because he's still going to be a player. He was second on the Pats and targets last year. Like who are we really buying in this New England offense? Like Juju Smith-Schuster will probably lead the team in catches. Tyquan Thornton, I like him, but how involved is he going to be? Parker is not.
There's been reports that
he's really shown us. He's got to get on the field. And, absolutely. Maybe he's only getting on the field in 3 wide receiver sets, but this isn't going to be a good team. They're going to want to run the ball.
Tight end centric, LeGarrette Blount type year.
And which tight end? Like Hunter Henry's going to have a couple grabs and one will be a touchdown. Gesicki is hurt, but when he's on the field, maybe he's involved. Let's be honest with the Pats. They're going to be a brutal football team, but they are going to use both of these running backs. And I don't know. Zeke could fall into 8 rushing touchdowns this year, and I would not be shocked one bit. So I
thought the Jamal Williams comparison was good. Well, what if? Would it be a shock? Would it be like legitimately? Would it be a shock if they both play the full season and Zeke has like 10, 12 rushing touchdowns?
No, I wouldn't be.
I mean, I guess it would be a shock that the offense was that good.
Yeah. I mean, shout out to our guy, Mike Clay, who they did a ESPN fantasy draft last night. I caught a second or 2 of it. And Ramondre was drafted and they went to Clay and Clay's like, man, you're going to be so ticked off when Zeke gets 10 rushing touchdowns. And it's like,
there you go.
It's not a stretch, right? To think that he could fall into those TDs. So I think that if you can get Ramondre in the 4th in a regular draft,
You're trying to get us flagged on,
good for you.
Enunciate TDs a little bit better next time.
I can't do it. I'm here for the hits. And then Zeke, if you just, I don't know, like 12th round, 11th round, if he's hanging around, there's not a lot of backs in that range that are going to have goal line work, and that's significant.
Yeah. All right, well then let's talk about the Dalvin Cook signing, because this one, I think it was very warranted to be concerned.
Yeah.
But there's so many layers to this. So, I was one of the lowest on Breece Hall before this, because I said on this very show, I was like, I'm reading the tea leaves over here. Like, they keep bringing people in, and they keep flirting with names. And it's like, that tells me Breece Hall's not 100% ready to go for the season. The only was like, well, you know what? Maybe I'll take a flyer, because Javonte Williams is supposed to be behind him, and yet Javonte's out there, and the team's being like, dude, chill out. You're doing enough. Stop trying to do more. We're just going to get you ready for week one. And yet Breece Hall is just not out there, and he's not out there, and he's not out there. And like, what is going on? And then they signed Dalvin Cook. And not only did they sign Dalvin Cook, here's the most important part of it. It's 8.6 potential. 7 is the flat. It's not 2 with 6.6 in potentials. It's not 3. It's not 1 with 5 potential. It is 7 flat with 1.6 in potential additional bonuses. That 7 flat is one of the higher marks for running backs in the NFL right now, if you go across the entire landscape. I see this, and I'm like, ooh, is Dalvin Cook the lead? And Breece Hall is, and I don't think it's a lead where it's not, like, if I said right now, looking at the contract, it sounds almost like a 55-45. Like, they're going to be almost an even split. This is going to be the Broncos, to bring up Javonte Williams. This is going to be the Broncos, Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams, like that kind of situation. But best case scenario, I think you might get a 60-40 back to Breece Hall once he's a 100%, but you're going to have to wait for that, which has always been the issue. Is like, is he going to be 100% himself, similar to Saquon Barkley, until October? And then what if they're saying, we got Aaron Rodgers, we got all these playmakers to potentially win a Super Bowl this year or next year. Breece Hall does help us, but giving Breece Hall 90% of the work makes no sense coming off that injury. We just signed a running back who was still really good last year. Like, no, he wasn't peak Dalvin Cook, but he was still really good last year. Also good in the passing game. So I'm saying, like, but then here's the weird part. Here's the thing to throw in there, Meaney. You get the Breece Hall is activated, and Dalvin Cook's not even showing up till next week.
Yeah.
So
this is a mess.
I'm still going. Like, I'll tell you, right now, I'm still going Breece Hall slightly in front of Cook, just for the upside. So I have them both as top end RB3s, because I can't push them higher. I know that sounds super low, because they both have top 15 upside. If either of them get 60% of the work, we're talking about top 15 upside. But I'm looking at the guys I have right in front of them. We're talking about, I don't like James Conner and the Cardinals, but he has nobody of relevance for really competition there. Khalil Herbert, we've talked about on the Monday show. Rashad White, I know, is getting all the work. Alexander Madison is going to get the majority of the work. I have all those names in front of them because I know what they're getting. Like, they're worth the flyers. Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook are definitely worth the cost of where I have them, and you could argue they should be going earlier, but there's significant risk. Like, either one of them could end up being an RB4 or 5.
I know. One of these guys could be a league winner. They may just be a headache all year long. I like the comparison of the Broncos guys and Javonte and Melvin Gordon. I kind of feel like it's going to be like that. I mean, the easiest thing to say is, Dalvin Cook will handle the full workload for the first few weeks of the season. Breece Hall will get eased in, and then at the halfway point, they'll make the switch, and maybe it'll be 60-40 Breece at the end of the season, which is what you want. You want your running back getting the majority of the touches at the end of the season. But Dalvin Cook's a good back. I still believe that he's a good back. He's a great pass-catching running back. And look at Aaron Jones over the past few years in Green Bay. Like, Aaron Jones has 6 rushing touchdowns in the last 2 years, but yet this guy has still been a solid RB2 because of his work through the air in the passing game. Is that going to be Dalvin Cook's job? Like, we know Breece Hall can catch. I mean, we've seen it. We saw like a 77-yard reception he brought to the house last year is like his 3rd or 4th game in the NFL. But Dalvin Cook has had a history of
Aaron
doing
Jones'
that.
work with Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I mean, it's I have Breece ahead of him, but I got these guys in the 20s. I feel like a little silly because I know a lot of people at FTN have already done their rankings, and I still see Breece like in the 18s. I got Breece Hall at like 23 and Cook at 26.
I'm even lower.
I think that there's
like 27.
So you're even
31.
lower. So we're more on the same page than Yeah. It's just a committee. This is a committee. It's going to be a committee all year. We're just not going to be sure of who's going to be the guy when they're both healthy. Are they going to ride the hot hand? They're both going to get touches. Like Rodgers gave up $7 million or whatever. He restructured his contract for this. Like this team has Super Bowl aspirations. Like let's get in another back.
Well,
both
and
of these
let's
running
not
backs
forget,
and roll
you're
them
saying
both out
committee, which committee means 3 or more. Timeshare is just 2. Let's remember, who is the head coach? What tree does he come from? What tree does Saleh come from? It's the Shanahan, which Michael Carter might not be on the team. Zonovan Knight might not be on the team. About Anaconda might not be on the team. But one of those 3 is going to be on the team. And could even get 10% of the touches themselves, especially if it's like Michael Carter is a pass catcher who looked explosive again.
I know. I think that there's a buy low. I think over the next couple of weeks drafting, there may be a buying opportunity for Breece Hall. I feel like Cook is going to go ahead of him, and Breece Hall is going to fall to the 6th, 7th round maybe. You're right. You're going to have to be patient. Do you want to spend a 6th round pick? Is that going to be your 2nd or your 3rd running back? And you may not get him full go until, I don't know, week 5 or week 6. And then even at that point, maybe it's just a straight up like,
well, I'm glad you brought that up.
2 guys. So it's tough, man. I think I'm crossing them both off my list.
Well, so like their upside is certainly there. Like again, you 6th round pick, you might be like, okay, Breece Hall does get 65% come October, and he ended up, could potentially league winner. But the argument I'll make, you said the 6th round, maybe even 5th, depending on your draft, and if somebody really sees the upside with either one of them. But this is why I'd like to get 2 running backs if possible at the first 4 rounds. Like, I've usually been 2 out of the first 3. First 4, especially because there's a lot of good names still sitting there in the 4th round because everybody's going wide receiver crazy this year. Pat Mayo, I did his show earlier this week, and he said we start zigging when people are zagging. It used to be draft wide receivers because everybody's going running back. It's flipped. Like now we're talking about Derrick Henry in the 2nd round. We're talking about,
and I don't like it because I'm a wide receiver guy. Why is this happening in the year I want to take all these wideouts?
Dude, Meaney, RB12, Travis Etienne, is going in the 4th round.
No, it's an
RB1 is going in the 4th. Like, so that's what I'm about to say is instead of chasing Breece Hall and Dalvin Cook saying, I hope I get the right one. I hope I have the upside, or maybe this plays out how I want. Or, hey, go back to the Broncos. Maybe they both finish as 21 and 22 or something like that as RBs, but it's going to be frustrating week in and week out. So get your 2 RBs in the first 4 rounds and then just draft the wide receivers that are sitting there, which are still pretty damn glorious because you're still talking about that giant tier that we always talk about. What do you think, real quickly? Nathan, I'm not the right person to ask. You should be asking Jeff, or not, I was about to say Jeff Feinberg. No, what's his face? Tim Andercuss. Like for the Jets' chances of winning the Super Bowl. That was just on paper. Fun. I'm not putting the bread on what Vegas has because the hype's behind them. It's just not worth what the cost is.
Yeah, and we don't have to dive into it too much, but I'm sure people are well aware of the schedule and the way that when I type in Jets schedule, you would feel like New York would pop up, but as a Canadian, Winnipeg pops up. But like this start, Bills, Cowboys, Chiefs, Broncos, Eagles, like that's a start that's dangerous. They got they're obviously going to have the Bills twice and Miami twice. The Chargers are on the schedule. They have a layup against the Raiders. The Giants won't be an easy one for them. That'll be a fun game at MetLife for those 2 teams. It's the Browns at the end of the season. It's not going to be easy for this Jets team. There's a lot of teams in the AFC that have 10.5 win totals. They're not all going to win 10, 11 games. This is not going to happen.
To hammer this point again, we talked about this way back when the schedules came out. The Giants got royally screwed.
Oh, yeah. You guys got screwed.
And you just reminded me about part of it, too. It's not even just that they have the road games. It's not even just the fact that 7 of their first 10, and they don't have to bye till later and all that. The Jets game could have been a road game, which essentially would have offset it and been like, haha, you get like a free home game. They made the Jets game their home, one of the Giants' home games. So they actually took it away from, they've actually, almost made it. You see what I'm saying? It's you gave them a really tough schedule, but hey, at least one of your road games isn't really a road game. No, they took that away from their home game. So the Giants just got, and this, I'm not wearing the hat just to be like, oh, the Giants got, but look at their,
they did.
I'm not the person.
They got.
I wasn't even the person. Warren Sharp was the one that pointed it out. I saw that on Twitter. I was like, I didn't even realize it was as bad as it was until he said that. So actually, speaking of the Giants, we've been trying to parse through their wide receivers and trying to figure out what the hell, who's going to be the guy. So, interestingly, it's week 1 in the preseason. We're going to have week 2 coming up. We're going to get a lot more from week 2. But a lot of starters rest for some teams. A lot of starters play sparingly and then get yanked. The interesting thing about the Giants was Isaiah Hodgins last year had some good rapport. Looked pretty good at times. He was their best receiver at times. But Paris Campbell and Darius Slayton got the night off. And Isaiah Hodgins stayed out there into the twos playing. Are we off on Isaiah Hodgins just from reading the tea leaves? That suggests he's not even 3. He's back down to being 4 or 5.
Well, they just brought in so many guys. I just feel like they all have to kind of, I don't know, play this thing out. There's just so many wide receivers now all of a sudden. I don't really like any of them. I just think it's going to be the Darren Waller show. I think it's going to be a whole lot of Saquon and a lot of Darren Waller, and early and often. I'm not surprised to hear that he's looked the best at camp and he's balling out and he looks great. And Daboll and what he's going to be able to do. Waller's going to line up all over the field. I am a little bit concerned about Hodgins. I know I've talked about him quite a bit. Maybe not on this show, but on Mean Streets. It's just like a guy to pick late in best ball drafts or in other drafts because of the rapport with Daniel Jones. I still feel like I like him more than Paris Campbell and Darius Slayton.
Really?
I don't know, man. I'm pretty much out on all these Giants guys.
So am I, but I'm coming around on a flyer and Darius Slayton.
Well, they're all pretty cheap.
He was the better one for a stretch last year. And I thought he was going to be
That's
gone.
important.
And he's got the night off. That's just all right.
Yeah.
So more interestingly, and if you go over to the Athletic for the sleepers column, Elijah Moore gets thrown in there. But there's an interesting one that we didn't get to on Monday. Elijah Moore was 3rd. Donovan Peoples-Jones was still number 2. Elijah Moore was only out there for the Browns in 11 sets, 3 wide. Does that concern you for Elijah Moore? Because we talked about it on the Athletic pod yesterday. Said I'm not moving him down much, but I did a little bit. And it's not because I love Elijah Moore. Yeah. But it's the snap counts. If they're going to keep him as the slot 3rd wide receiver only, he's just not going to be on the field enough. That's my concern.
And when he's on the field, you still got Amari and David Njoku's a mismatch. And Donovan Peoples-Jones actually was pretty decent towards the end of last season.
He surprised me NFL-wise.
Yeah. He was getting down the field. He was making some grabs. And
I thought he was going to be like Nate Washington. I wasn't expecting much from him.
Yeah. I mean, Deshaun has a deep ball. So if he's going to be the deep ball guy, I mean, Amari obviously was used differently too at a higher ADOT in Cleveland than he did in years past with Dallas. But I still believe in Elijah. I think he can be an asset to somebody as their fifth wide receiver. We'll see how this does play out. I'm all in on Murray. I'm all in on Nick Chubb. I know that this team is going to try to throw the football a little bit more. I know they've been run heavy in the years past. I think they're going to try to open it up. Why wouldn't they? They got a guy like Deshaun Watson. I think that they can trust. But early going is not what you want to hear so far for Elijah. You want him on the field a lot in the slot. He's good. Maybe that'll just take time.
Maybe. All right. So one big one I promised we'd get to today. But real quickly before we get to it, do you care, Meaney? Quick hit. Do you care that Troutman was out there over Dulcich? And do you care that Luke Musgrave was doing a lot with the starters?
Musgrave is interesting, but I don't care about Troutman. What year is it? What are we doing? It's the same
it is Sean
every
Payton.
year.
He brought him over.
I know. I'm aware. The connection, I get it. I still like Greg Dulcich. If he's going to fall to tight end 14, 15, I'm going to take him with my last pick. Whatever.
Here's the only thing I'll say about Musgrave is there is zero reason there should be such a massive gap between Kincaid, Musgrave, and Sam Laporta. They're all... If you're taking a flyer on one of them, they're all worthy of a flyer. But there's no reason that Kincaid should be going at the middle of the drafts and Laporta Musgrave should be all the way at the end. Laporta's actually a little bit in front of him.
Yeah, I feel like Laporta's probably going to have the better season between him and Kincaid, just based on pure opportunity alone. I think
there you go. Heard it here first. All right. Let's put this out there. Let's have the dissection and see if this comes to fruition on Saturday when I don't know. Actually, whenever the Jaguars play their second preseason game, Christian Kirk was not a top 2 starting wide receiver for the Jaguars. He was out there just like Elijah Moore, only in wide receiver 3s. Do you think that changes in week 2? And if he is, let's say it does, 2 scenarios. It changes, he's back to 1 and 2. Is it just everything's good? We're just fine. Panic's over. He's wide receiver 26, whatever. But if he's out there again, only in 3 wide, how far down do you move him your draft board? Do you move him on your draft board, Meaney?
Yeah, maybe to the point where I don't even take him. I got him in the mid 20s. I'd probably put him in the 30s. Do they really like Zay Jones more than Kirk? I guess. Like, I thought Kirk was just going to be locked into a slot role. I know he scored a touchdown in that game, in that preseason game in the end zone. I mean, when you bring in a guy like Calvin Ridley, it is going to mess up the whole scenario for the wide receiver room.
You just gave Kirk a massive contract, which
it.
We all joked, and then it ended up being the right move.
Yeah, I mean, he lived up to it at a career season. He was fantastic last year.
Let me phrase it this way.
He was awesome.
Let's say, and we'll get out of here on this. Let's say we're going to recap next week, so we're going to talk about it again. But it's fun to think about, just to watch. If he is third again, if he is only out there an 11-3 wide, if he's only out there in that, do you take Treylon Burks or Christian Kirk in your draft?
I still think I would lean Kirk because of the offense, but that's probably the tier that he belongs to be in. But I think this is just really good news for Calvin Ridley. I know it's early on, but man, I think 2 of the first 3 throws from Trevor Lawrence were to Ridley, and I liked seeing that. Like, let's get our new shiny toy involved, and this guy's an alpha. So
okay, I'm sorry, we're over time, but I just changed.
Go Kirk.
I'm going to do a question to you for a different way now. All right.
Okay.
You have to pick one. You have to pick one or the other. Calvin Ridley, better than 12.5. Christian Kirk, worse than 35.5. Which is more likely?
Kirk.
So more likely Kirk doesn't finish as a wide receiver 3 is lower than that than it is more likely than Calvin Ridley finishes as a wide receiver 1.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Maybe that's Lauren. Maybe that's Lauren just in my head. big Kirk fan, Lauren Carpenter. Or no, Ridley fan, excuse me.
Yeah, Ridley fan. Speaking of which, we are back Saturday morning, Sirius XM, 9 to 11 in the morning, so make sure you check that out. Please remember to review, subscribe, and do all the good stuff to get the podcast love back that we lost from the wonderful iTunes people. And, follow Chris Meaney, all in, code 20% off, and over at The Athletic, the articles are out and lots of fun, and we will see you on Saturday, possibly, but definitely Monday. We love you guys. Yay!
Cheers.
Meaning